You are listening to the People Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do. Hello, people-centric leaders. Welcome to another episode of the People Centric Podcast, where we are here today because, well, we're here every week. We kind of do this. We keep doing a podcast, but this specific topic was brought to us by a listener, and they said, actually, let me back up. Let me first introduce who I have with me, Philip and Stephanie. How are you guys today?
Good. Yeah.
Good.
I am quite well. We're good. Things are great. Yes.
We're friendly. I'm going to get back to that.
Friendly yet professional with my work proximity associate colleagues.
Work proximity associates. Yep.
So weird.
Which leads me to the topic, which was given to us by a listener. And the topic is basically friendships at work. What the listener said to us was that their husband works for a very large corporation with a lot of salespeople. And the salespeople all friend each other on Facebook and go out to dinners and have formed cliques. And the question was, there was two questions, is this good for the company? Is this good for culture? And what are our thoughts on friendships at work? So I'm bringing it here to my friends that I work with to just say, what do we think about this?
Yes, and I think it is the thought. Because I feel like when I heard that question come in, there were things that were kind of flags of nobody likes a clique. We didn't like it in high school. We don't like it as adults. I think it's weird when things become exclusionary and some people are getting invited and others aren't. That's just weird in general. And also I'm here looking at two people that I would call my friends too, that I work with and I know mostly through work or professional settings. So yes, but I think there's probably some boundaries. I think there's I hate to use the words right or wrong, but I think there's kind of a right or wrong way to do this. So I'm very curious to dig into it.
Me too. Philip, what were your initial thoughts on this topic?
I love that we're going to discuss it because whether you're a small team or a huge team, this is always a question that comes up. How to balance this? Because if you're doing great work with people, you're solving hard problems together, you will probably build great bonds. I think that's what we would say engagement is, showing up really well and then wanting to do more of that. And so my initial thoughts, even from her story, this person's example, I'll be honest, I love to be invited to a party. I love to be invited to a thing. And I think humans are just interesting, whether I'm paid to be interested in them or not. So I'm of the category that is susceptible to love this kind of thing. And also, there's not many rooms I don't actually get invited to. And so I'm like, man, what is that like to be on the outs? I can empathize, but I don't get there very often. But it matters because it has huge ramifications for your teams. And to Stephanie's point, how you go about this is probably better than saying, is there a right or a wrong? There's not a universal statement that we'll talk about today, but a lot of tactics to make sure that you're being very intentional and very, very equitable, because teams sink or swim based on how you friendify the people you work with.
Philip, I love that you were also I don't know what that feels like. I've never not been invited. And you meant it in such the kindest way because I know you well. And to be honest, it's true. Everywhere I go now, people are like, oh, who are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm Stephanie at People Centric. And they're like, oh, I know Philip. And it's actually funny enough, Philip's work anniversary today. And it's one thing that is awesome about working with Philip because he does build such good relationships with people. So yes, Philip does actually get invited to everything, and is very beloved. But I will just say from my personal experience, I've had workplace friendships go the wrong way before, or where like, especially with your boss, or like I remember one time earlier in my career sitting in a conversation, kind of a tough conversation with my boss at the time, and we were a small team. And she looks at me and she's like, well, you are my best friend. And so da 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 da. And I remember hearing that and thinking, oh, I knew we were friends. But that made then all of our following conversations really challenging for me. Like, wow, if you feel like I'm your best friend, not just my best friend at work, like my best friend in total, I think we've blurred a boundary here that then I will say, yeah, later on in our relationship made it really hard. And that was kind of a messy breakup. Whenever I decided to leave the company, because there was that feeling was there, and we didn't probably maintain the good relational boundaries that we should have.
So you did just touch on something that I definitely want to go to, but since there are so many layers to this onion, I kind of want to start with sort of the listener's question. She said that they're all on the sales team, right? And I think what she's talking about is the same department. You're all doing the same job. You're all the same level. How do we feel about friendships with people at work that are doing the same work as you in the same department or at the same hierarchical level as you? Let's start with that one, and then we'll move our way into like leaders and bosses and all of that stuff. But how do we feel about the same level friendships?
I think this is a little bit of the easier yes for me, at least, is like, yeah, if you're all at the same level, you kind of have the same jobs, nobody reports to each other. Gosh, it's a lot easier just to like maybe have a genuine friendship with those people, or do more of like the hang outside of work, or we did all this X, Y, or Z together, or even like going to a conference because we're all there to kind of play the same role when we show up places. So I think that one is a lot easier. Just naturally, and kind of what you're saying we're going to get to, Dan, is like there's not as much power dynamic there typically. Now there still might be competition between that group that might make things feel icky at times. And kind of what we started with, there might be cliques that form depending on the size of the team that don't always feel great. But I think that one is a little bit easier, because when we're in the same role, we have the same responsibilities, we're kind of have the same expectations. It's a little bit easier because I'm not judging your performance and you're not judging my performance. We both know what's expected of us. That's kind of my thought. I'm curious what you two think.
Yeah, I agree, and also want to know if there are still some boundaries we should keep in this layer.
Yeah,
are there still things?
Yeah, I hear that, and I very much love what Stephanie says, and also think I know that no team is static. It's inevitable that one of those team members will be promoted eventually. And then if they're all friends on Facebook and have built these relationships outside of work, that they will have to make a choice and a decision at that point too. And so in the midst of it, at this purely director level, even, I think it is interesting, maybe just one other caveat. The person who shared this opinion, it's their spouse's team that they're basically giving this example of. So I would infer then that their significant other has voiced either how much they love this or how annoying or challenging it is to navigate this at times, because these are circles where I could imagine, sure, maybe our relationship is just outside of work. That's friendship, and then business is business. But for those people who don't get invited to the after work things where business inevitably comes up, now I am out of the wings. I don't have the same decision-making authority because I get information at our regular work meetings, not at the happy hour. And so I have a competitive disadvantage. So I will fake being your friend to make sure I'm in the room to get things done. So what are the boundaries? I think some of the boundaries are, if you're going to do that, to really build a good firewall as a team, to make it clear. Like, if you want to be friends and talk about work, maybe some things come up, but don't make your after hour meetings with your work colleagues all about work because
Yeah.
one, that's just boring. Be more exciting and interesting. Two, it will lead to a difference on your teams, and other people will start to notice that you are leading and making decisions outside of the scope of your day job, as it were. So that's one boundary I would recommend.
I totally agree with that, and can think back to like, I think workplace friendships I've had that went really well, and then some that did not go as well. The ones that went as well, yeah, when we were hanging out, we're not talking about work, right? And it's not to say that work doesn't come up, because it does, but we didn't spend our time talking about that. And that was not a place where we shared information. We still relied on the company information sharing. We used the meetings appropriately. We did some of those things. We did definitely have that boundary where we just call it like, we don't shop talk. Like if we're hanging out over the weekends and we're going to meet for, to sit on a patio and have a drink together or hang out, or I'm going to go to your kids' t-ball game and sit with you. Like that is not the moment for shop talk. That's friend talk, right? So this is where we're going to talk about those things and know which hat we're wearing. And I will say the ones where it felt like it didn't go as well were the ones where, yeah, suddenly the like, hey, let's grab a drink after work or do something was shop talk. And then the ones where I think it got toxic was then we're talking about other people on the team who are not there. Or we're complaining about the other people on the team to each other, or we're complaining about the boss or something we have to do, because that is how the meeting after the meeting starts. Right? If you've heard us use that phrase before when we talk about toxicity on a team and where that comes from, one example we'll say is like, sometimes the toxic person on your team is leading the meeting after the meeting, right? It's like, we all got out of that big meeting, but then a small group of us got together somehow after, and we are kind of crap talking what just happened in that meeting, or other people in the meeting, or the boss, or the strategy, or any of those things, which I think then starts causing some of those like unhealthy, clicky things. I'll say the other thing I thought of from the suggestion that came in was, she was like, yeah, it just feels like high school clicky, and to belong on this team, you have to participate. And so that would be the other thing that I would say, if you're on the same level as other people, make sure again you're holding that boundary, and then that's not the only relational moments you have with people on the team, right? Because there are some people who keep really clear boundaries and they don't have friendships at work. And so if the only way to like build trust and get to know each other is to hang out outside of business hours, you're probably going to have people then who feel really isolated on your team, because some people are just never going to be comfortable with that, or they're going to think, honestly, if this is required of the job, then pay me for that time. Which again, I don't always love the approach on that, but understand some of the intent behind it, that if I have to go to all these outside of work things in order to have enough relationship with people to do my job well, and that feels like business hours. And so think about that and make sure you're not being exclusionary. Make sure you're not doing all shop talk, and make sure that you are creating space inside of the normal workday and work week to build trust and build relationships. It's not all happening outside of the office.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll remind people of, like, if you're going to have friends at the same level, just because they're the same level doesn't mean they're in the same point of life, right? Like you might have a single mom who has 3 kids at home, and a college grad who just like has no real responsibilities outside of work, right? And so you got to remember to balance some of that too. And just because Susan doesn't go out with you every night, but Carol doesn't mean that Susan doesn't want to. She's just a different point of life and cannot do that, right? So I think you just have to manage some of that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then Philip, you touched on the next thing I wanted to go to, which is inevitably someone's going to get promoted from this little group. Something's going to happen.
Do we gasp then? Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Hot take. They got promoted and not the rest of us.
Or we're very excited that they got promoted, but what does that do to the group? What happens then?
What happens then? I imagine a mushroom cloud like blowing up in everyone's hearts and minds. Because Diana, to your point, people are so excited, right? That's just the right fit. I was talking to a leader last week where on their team, the team all went to this one leader and said, we want you to take this role because someone retired. We want you to take this role. We want you to take this role. And he said, I took this role because nobody else on my team would take it. And we interviewed externally as well, but I was the best candidate. And I said, how did you know that your team wanted you to be the person? They all said, well, we want you. And I said, and why did they want you to be the leader and they did not want to be the leader? He said, it's because it's a terrible role. It's a hard role. And a lot of them wanted to remain friendly and not take on that leadership responsibility, right? I always think back to I was a employee at Mama Jean's Natural Market here in town, and at the ripe age of 18, with full braces and puffy hair, I was promoted not only to night manager, but then to department head quickly after. And so I had people twice my age who had been peers who suddenly reported to me in the org structure, whose check-ins I led. And there was one that specifically looked at me, and she, her little nuclear bomb statement to me was, look, she leaned in the middle of one of our third check-ins, I think, so 6 months into this situation. She said, I should have had your role. She just said it. She said, I was the person they were interviewing before they decided to give it to you. These were the words she used. And basically said, I don't know why we're talking here. And so how I, as the, leader, who was definitely still scrambling, trying to figure stuff out, I just said, well, I cannot change that. I said, but we're both in the spots we're in. So instead of talking about that, moving forward, let's talk about how we can work together really well. And so one of those lucky moments at 18 with braces, I think. And so again, with that, if it would have happened a second time, different conversation. I think that's when you then say, okay, if you're not willing to work on the team, what this looks like. But I think a part of it is incumbent on how that leader who is promoted specifically responds, and why these friendship ties are even matter more when this happens, because do you maintain the same friendships you had before? I think that's a very personal question. They probably need to change. Something in them needs to change. At least for yourself, you need to make your own rules to know if you're being a good leader and not just a good friend anymore.
Philip, how emotionally intelligent of you to answer the way that you did. I didn't do it that way.
What did Diana do?
Oh, I was a snarky little butthole, and I just said, like, well, they picked me over you for some reason. I don't know. So now we got to figure it out, which you just did way better, right? Like, you just said it way better. And I just was like, I don't know why they picked me, but they didn't pick you. So now I'm stuck doing this and I need your help. I just need you to like be part of it. So this is where we're at. And admittedly it went fine, right? But I think acknowledging is probably key, like in that scenario. And then I want to know what you did in the friendship area and what you did, because I was very close with these people and I just decided to cut it all off. And I was like, nope, I'm their boss. I'm not going to do it. And I don't know, looking back, I don't think that was the right call. I think I probably damaged my ability to manage well by just saying, like, I can no longer be your friend. So what did you do? Were you friends with these people? What did you do?
I would say in that time I was probably less friends beyond work, so I was very friendly. But when I was my role before this one, director of development and community engagement, when I first took that role, I had a fellow director of a different program. I think I introduced a meeting at one point, and I said, "Hey, friends," to start off the day, and instead of saying, "This person, I love her, she's hilarious," she came up at the end and just one-on-one, which I appreciated. She said, "Okay, I am not your friend." She said, so in the future, I will just resist anytime anyone introduces a whole meeting by saying, "Hey, friends, this is not something I appreciate." And this is where I'll be super honest and why this topic I think matters a lot. That's the moment I said, oh my gosh, I have never wanted to be someone's friend more now than this moment. I didn't say it, but I was like, I will get to you. And long story short, we are friends now. I no longer work there, but we are friends. We talked on the phone last week. I got her. But
see, again, I would have been like, cool, I'm not your friend either.
I'm never going to talk to you anymore.
Like, I'd have done it the exact opposite, Philip.
Right.
I'm so in awe.
I always think for me, the goal of work is not to be a friend first, because I think the goal at work, right, is to treat people well and then to have results, to execute results. So my framing is always, how can we execute results and get to where we need to go, and then manage relationships along the way? I think you are more winsome if you build friendly, positive relationships in doing so. But a friend to me is someone, right, very different. If I call you at 2 a.m. because I need something, that's a true friend, or because I just have a crazy situation. I don't do that with a lot of the people I have worked with.
Yeah. Well, I think that you touched on a couple of things. One, it's once you introduce the power dynamic, right? Once I am now in charge of your accountability, your results, your whatever, it shifts how you have to behave. And it shifts, I don't know, it shifts the relationship. There is now a power dynamic. So I do want to talk more about that. And then the other thing you brought up is like, it's all about effectiveness, right? This is, if we say that leadership is just influence, then you have to be effective at influencing people to get more from everyone. And I think some people try to use friendship as influence, and those words are not interchangeable. So, yeah.
Yeah, I
Stephanie,
totally
what would you
agree.
say about?
Well, I totally agree. And I think the one that I hear most often from leaders is, yeah, either I got promoted and now what do I do with these friendships? Or like I hired my friend, which happens a lot too. Either I hired my friend thinking, yeah, it was all going to be good and fine. But then I think what I hear a lot of people say is they didn't set the boundaries early that they needed to. And so now I have to hold this person accountable to something. And it feels really uncomfortable to do that because we didn't talk about what that would look like in the relationship and how that would impact our relationship before we started working together. Or even one I heard from a leader recently is like, well, we were at the same level and then I left to take another job and then came back around. And by the time I did, now my friend is now my director. And we stayed friends that whole like interim period of time. So now how do we manage this? And so I think my advice would be like, yeah, if you're struggling with that, because it is a power dynamic, right? Like how I always think of it, just to say it really bluntly, is like, if you have the ability to fire me or change my compensation, then like true friendship, like what you are describing, Philip, is actually really, really, really hard because I can't fully trust that as a friend because you have other decisions you'd have to make, right? And so I think, my recommendation to people would be like, yeah, if you have that, talk early about what the boundaries are. I mean, I think like no shop talk outside of the office is a good rule as much as possible. But then like really, yeah, talk about how will you address these things and how we talk about it. I remember one time I interviewed for a job where a good friend of mine would have been my boss. I didn't end up taking it, but I remember before I even did the first interview, she and I had a conversation about what that would look like, how it would impact our friendship, kind of what her accountability style was and how she would approach things. And we ended up being like, okay, I think we can work through this if it's the right fit. But it was interesting, even in the interview, someone on her team asked me, hey, I know you guys are friends outside of work. How are you going to manage that? Because I think there was this fear that I would just come in and I would be the favorite or be untouchable, unaccountable in some ways. And like I said, that job ended up not being the right fit for me, but I've also worked for a friend before. And honestly, that dynamic and relationship worked really well, but I'll also be honest to say it changed our friendship because we did put those good boundaries in place. We stopped talking about as much deep stuff as we normally would to remain more objective at work. And so our friendship looks really different now, even though we don't work together, because we got so used to operating that way. So I think it's possible to be friends with a leader or your boss, but the stakes are higher. And I think you've got to be radically transparent about it with your team. Like I said, like my friend and I did, we were radically transparent in the interview process that I was her friend first. We had a relationship outside of work. That was something, even when she brought my application to the team, we both agreed her team had veto power. If they didn't even want to interview me because I was her friend first, that was okay. And now that may not be a scenario you use everywhere, but I think you've got to be radically transparent about it, because I've also heard the stories where people are like, oh, well, they became friends and now they're friends with the boss and now they're hanging out. And oh, they just did this trip together, or they're doing all these things together. And then that's how the really wild rumors usually start too. Like I have a friend who's living through this right now where she was like, yeah, the rumor now is my boss and this person have a romantic relationship, and that would be really inappropriate for their dynamic. And the boss and this person aren't really doing anything to address the rumor. So they've been super secretive about the relationship. And now that this rumor is out there, which I'm sure they've heard, they're not addressing it. So I'm also curious to like put that out there of like, okay, we've talked a lot about how do you maybe get it to the right place, but what do you do when it goes wrong or off, or it's starting to feel like maybe we didn't build the boundaries that we needed to, and there is a power dynamic at play.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask a similar question because I think it all ties together. And this is a little risky to ask right now, so I'm just going to do it and ask for forgiveness later. But I feel like our team we're all friends, right? Like we're friends with each other. But I also think we have some maybe unspoken boundaries, or we've put in good professional boundaries that we have never really talked about. So what are some of those things that if you want to do friendships at work well, what are some things that you should put in place, or things that maybe we have put in place that we haven't even talked about to kind of make sure that it goes well?
Have you ever watched Mean Girls? There's
Have
this
we ever watched Mean Girls?
this
Yeah.
list.
We're
think
millennials.
what helps. That's it, right? Yeah. There's the list of what. No, I'm joking. We don't
You're
have
on my list, Philip. Now.
Which list? That's it. Oh no,
I'm just kidding.
you're not wearing pink, and it's Tuesday. That's okay.
On
No.
Tuesdays we wear blue.
That's right. Blue. That's People Centric always wears blue.
Yeah.
I love that question. I'll maybe add just a couple quick thoughts to that, because I think that what we have done well as a team, and our size helps us with this dynamic as well. We physically have the capacity to know each other in a greater way. I think there's a lot of intentionality as well, because Diana is in Tacoma and most of us are in Springfield. And so I think that adds an intentionality to make sure that we all are seen and known to an extent. So I think that's an important part that borders on the friendship side. But we also talk a lot about organizational needs. And so I think one of our unspoken rules, and Stephanie mentioned this, the power dynamic that comes into play if you're a leader versus a friend will think about your buddy's needs as opposed to the organization's needs. A leader will think about the organization's needs, and then also the people needs sometimes, right? A friend that doesn't give you the time off that you wanted is a bad friend. So I think one of the unspoken rules we bring to the table is acknowledging and honoring the roles and authority of like every role. And I think we typically lead with that first, knowing this is the game that we're playing and how it operates. And so we can set our own wants and needs in our hands, still having it, but knowing that's not the most important thing always. So if there's a personal need, a personal ask, we frame it really well around what does our organization and team need, and how can that happen while I also have my personal needs met?
Yeah, I think that's well said. I think the biggest thing that our team does, and maybe this is piggybacking off of what you just Philip said, is the transparency. Is like we do make it very clear what conversation are we having right now, because we all are friends. Are we having a friend chat? Are we having this? And it's not weird. Like we're not like, okay, are we having a friend talk or a boss talk? But we kind of know, and we know when we don't mix the two. Right. So we don't, in the middle of like maybe a performance review, we don't then start bringing up a bunch of personal things. Like we let that meeting agenda be very clear. We will be talking about your performance. Your performance is being evaluated, and that's what we're going to talk about in there. And I think our leadership team does a good job of only taking it personal if the employee leads it that way in the conversation, and kind of like letting us guide that. So like if I tell you, oh yeah, well, I feel this way because, and then I share some personal stuff to help you maybe understand it, right? Like then you could ask more questions. But, maybe things about my past. And I think our team has really good boundaries that like that stuff then doesn't get to come up in a performance related professional setting. And then also just transparency too, like when our team hangs out outside of work, it is public, it is obvious, we know when other people are doing it, and that's not a policy we have. I think it's just, again, like an unspoken best practice and boundary is like, we don't try to hide the fact if anybody hung out outside of work. And in fact, like, we talk about it a lot. Like last summer, I went over to Dawn's house and we made ice cream and had pizza together with like significant others. And because we had been talking forever about like these like dream bourbon ice cream flavors that didn't exist. But you know what? We also did, our whole team knew about it. It was on our work calendars. We sent pictures to the team of what was happening so that nobody was like, oh, well, Stephanie's over at the boss's house and getting insider scoop, or their relationship is weird in any way. Like we were just very, very transparent about what we were doing and why we were hanging out, and that it was something that other people were welcome to participate if they also felt a burning passion to have a good bourbon flavored ice cream.
I do love that. I love that. Yeah. And I love how you said, like, we know when to separate and when not to, right? I think that is key. Just today, Bethany and I were supposed to do like a work check-in, and it ended up being all personal. And at a certain point, I did very consciously put aside the work stuff and be like, I'm not going to bring any of this up. We'll reschedule that, right? I'm going to be intentional about using this time for us to connect, and then we'll do the work thing in a minute, right? Like I'll reschedule that. So there was a moment where I had to say, am I here to be a friend and connect, or am I here to be a boss and talk about work, right? And so I just used the time to like actually connect. But I will also say that I think that intentional connection time is important in an organization. I think you do need to know your people. I think you need to be human and build connection and build community with the people you work with. So for me, it is a little fuzzy. And I think that's what we're saying, right? The friendships at work are always going to be a little fuzzy. But I think if you use them well and intentionally, and not for gain and not for knowledge and not for power grabs, but if you do it well, if you do it for humanity, I don't know, if you do it because you genuinely are a good human and want to know the people you work with and for, then I think that's the right approach. And again, there are probably still some more boundaries that we just like have there and don't talk about. I'm sure there's a ton of HR boundaries. I'm sure there's a ton of, just like things we don't generally talk about. The really hot button issues, we do bring them up every once in a while, but we don't generally do that, right? Like we kind of keep that stuff on the side too. So I don't know, there's probably like really clear boundaries that we have that we just don't even talk about. Yeah, I don't know. Final thoughts?
I had a final thought. I think early on I had a leader of our university, President Smart. Many people know President Smart in our community. I was 21. I sat at a dinner table or something at some Missouri State event where he and his wife were, along with me and my wife, Claire. And basically the whole night, people were coming up to President Smart, saying all the things, all the check-ins, big deal community leader. And I just said, how do you do this? I said, because everyone that walks up acts like they're your most special friend, and you go to everything, and you're not even able to eat your chicken. So tell me now for the rest of my life, what should I know about how to manage this? And he said, okay, you would know in your life only a few people 1,000 feet deep, but you'll know 1,000 people an inch deep. He said, so it's really important to know the two. It doesn't mean you treat people poorly, but I think what we're talking about today is my play is knowing your friends, who your friend needs to be, use that friend to be a friend, and then be a good person, but then think about not as much the depth, but going 1,000 miles long. Because if you don't work with someone today, you will eventually in some capacity. So think of the long walk and build the deep friendships where the friendships are appropriate. And then at work, look between the lines. And there's not a policy that can guarantee that's done well, but playing the long game to treat people well and be fulfilled in what you do.
Yeah, I would agree. I think to echo both of your final thoughts, it's just like have the right intentions when you do this, and approach people just with kindness, right? If any of your reason for getting together with someone is not just I'm curious to get to know this person better. I just like want to get to know them. It's not that pure, just like let's get interested about the people we work with and get to know them. If there's anything else in your mind, maybe take one step back and like evaluate your approach first. Because if it's, well, I'm their leader and so I want to understand how to manage them better, probably not your right approach then to hang out with them outside of work. Maybe you need more structure for that. Or it's, hey, I'm going to get to be friends with them because I think they're the one that's up for the promotion next and I want to be friendly with the boss. And again, I know Diana's face is reacting to these statements really strongly, but like I've heard people say it before and sometimes we don't want to admit it, but that sometimes our intention for getting to know someone isn't always completely altruistic. And so I think it's just like get to know people because people are worth getting to know. And I think we all deserve to trust the people that we work with. And so be someone who's trustworthy in the relationships that you're building and prove by the way you build relationships that whether you're the boss or the leader or the colleague or workplace proximity associate, that you are worthy of their trust so that vulnerability can happen in the right moments.
You guys, I feel like the last closing statements hit on so many more things that we could talk about. So now I'm like, okay, we should probably need to do this topic 6 more times to cover all of the things, but we'll end it here for today. If you have specific questions about friendships at work and how to navigate that, if you're dealing with that in your own life and would just like one of us to talk to you or give you advice, reach out to us. We're always happy to talk to you, talk through situations. We're here for you. If you want to submit a topic just like this listener did, please do. We're happy to take that as well. Listen to the outro to learn how to get a hold of us. Otherwise, we will see you next time. Thank you for listening to the People Centric Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic. Until then, be well and lead well.